Magic Johnson probably figured the years would catch up with him eventually, forcing him to retire from basketball.
At 65 years old, Earvin Johnson Jr. wakes up every morning with the energy of a man who has something to prove, not to the world, not to the critics, not to the skeptics who lined up in 1991 to write the final chapter of his story before he had even begun to write it himself. He has something to prove to the communities that raised him, to the young athletes who are watching, and to the fundamental proposition that black wealth is not an accident, not a windfall, and not a story that ends when the final buzzer sounds. Magic Johnson's morning does not begin on a basketball court. It begins in a boardroom, or on a phone call with an investor, or in the quiet of a Los Angeles morning where the city is still waking up, and he is already 3 meetings deep into a day that will generate more wealth before noon than most NBA contracts generate in a season. The world knows the smile. It knows the 6'9" point guard who made the Los Angeles Lakers the most electric team in professional basketball history, who won 5 championships and 3 MVP awards, and redefined what was possible for a man of his size and his vision on a basketball floor. What the world has been slower to understand and what the financial record makes unmistakably clear is that the basketball was always preparation. The real game, the longer game, the game that Magic Johnson was always most gifted for, was the one that started the moment he walked off the court for the last time. His net worth today is estimated at $1 billion. Not from basketball, not from endorsements, from ownership, patient, strategic, community-centered ownership built brick by brick across 3 decades in neighborhoods that corporate America had written off and Magic Johnson had written into his business plan. This is that story. And it starts, as all great American stories do, in a place that had every reason not to produce a billionaire and produced one anyway. Early life and origins. Earvin Johnson Jr. was born on August 14, 1959, in Lansing, Michigan, the heart of the American Midwest, a city shaped by the automobile industry, by the rhythms of working-class black life, and by the particular kind of communal determination that emerges when a community has been given less than it deserves and decides to build something extraordinary from what remains. Lansing was not a city of glamour or abundance. It was a city of work ethic, of church on Sunday, of fathers and mothers who held down 2 jobs so their children could hold down 1 dream. His father, Earvin Johnson Sr., worked on the assembly line at General Motors by day and hauled garbage on weekends to generate the additional income a family of 10 children required. The lesson that embedded itself permanently in his son's consciousness was not about sacrifice as a concept, but about sacrifice as a daily, unglamorous, necessary practice. Earvin Sr. was not a man who talked about building wealth. He was a man who built it quietly, 1 shift at a time, for people who depended on him. That model of showing up, of generating, of building for others became the organizing principle of his son's entire adult life. His mother, Christine Johnson, was the emotional center of the household, a woman of deep faith, fierce warmth, and absolute clarity about what her children were capable of and what they were expected to become. The Johnson home was full in every sense of the word. It was full of people, full of noise, full of love, and full of a seriousness about education and character that balanced the physical abundance of siblings and cousins and neighborhood children who moved through that house like it belonged to all of them. Young Earvin discovered basketball at Everett High School in Lansing, where his combination of size, vision, and what could only be described as an almost supernatural joy for the game made him immediately extraordinary. He played with a smile that became his signature, not a performance of happiness, but a genuine expression of a person doing precisely what they were made to do. A local sports writer nicknamed him Magic after watching him record 36 points, 16 rebounds, and 16 assists in a single high school game. The name stuck because it was true. He led Everett High to a state championship. Michigan State University came calling, and the trajectory of a life was set, though not in the direction most people would have predicted. Career journey and evolution. Magic Johnson's 2 seasons at Michigan State University produced one of the most celebrated moments in college basketball history. The 1979 NCAA Championship game, played against Larry Bird's Indiana State team, remains the most watched college basketball game ever, broadcast a cultural event that announced both men to a national audience and ignited one of the great rivalries in the history of American sport. Magic's Michigan State team won. He was named the tournament's most outstanding player. He was 19 years old, and the NBA draft was waiting. The Los Angeles Lakers selected him with the first overall pick in 1979, and what followed over the next 12 seasons was a sustained period of basketball excellence that reshaped the sport's relationship with entertainment, with celebrity, and with the city of Los Angeles itself. 5 NBA championships, 3 NBA Finals MVP awards, 3 regular season MVP awards, 12 All-Star selections. Magic Johnson and the Showtime Lakers, alongside head coach Pat Riley and teammates including Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, and Byron Scott, produced a brand of basketball so aesthetically compelling, so genuinely thrilling, that they transformed the NBA from a regional sports league into a global entertainment franchise. The basketball achievements are extraordinary, but what is more relevant to the story of Magic Johnson's billion-dollar business empire is what he was observing, absorbing, and planning during those championship years. He was watching how the Lakers operated as a business. He was watching how Jerry Buss built a sports franchise into an entertainment brand. He was watching how corporate partnerships were structured, how arena revenue was generated, how the relationship between sports and commerce created wealth that dwarfed anything available to the players themselves. He was taking notes, and he was asking questions that most of his contemporaries were not yet thinking to ask. In November of 1991, Magic Johnson held one of the most consequential press conferences in sports history, announcing that he had tested positive for HIV and would be retiring from professional basketball immediately. The announcement sent shockwaves through the sports world, through the entertainment industry, and through the national conversation about HIV and AIDS, at a moment when that conversation was still shaped by fear, stigma, and profound misinformation. Magic Johnson's response to his diagnosis was characteristic. He did not retreat. He became an advocate, a spokesman, and eventually a living counter-narrative to everything the public thought it knew about HIV returning to play in the 1992 All-Star Game, winning a gold medal with the Dream Team at the Barcelona Olympics, and managing his condition with the medical care and personal discipline that has allowed him to live in full, vibrant health for over 30 years since that announcement. He returned briefly to the Lakers in 1996, then stepped fully into the business world that had been calling to him since his playing days. What happened next was not an athlete trying to stay relevant. It was a businessman deploying everything he had learned over 12 years at the intersection of sports, entertainment, and commerce into a deliberate, disciplined, long-term wealth-building strategy, financial overview, and business ventures. Magic Johnson's estimated net worth of $1 billion represents one of the most extraordinary wealth-building stories in the history of professional sports, not because of its scale alone, but because of its architecture. His NBA career earnings, while significant for the era, totaled approximately $100 million over 13 seasons. That figure, in isolation, would place him comfortably in the category of wealthy former athletes. What he did with it, and what he built beyond it, placed him in an entirely different category. The foundation of Magic Johnson's business empire is Magic Johnson Enterprises, the holding company he established in the early 1990s as the vehicle for his investment and business development activities. The company's initial focus was on bringing quality retail, dining, and entertainment options to underserved urban communities, a strategy that was simultaneously a business insight and a moral commitment. Magic Johnson understood, from his own experience growing up in Lansing, that the assumption underlying most corporate retail strategy that low-income communities were not viable markets was simply wrong. Those communities had spending power. They had loyalty. They had an appetite for quality that had never been adequately served because the corporations with the capital to serve it had never bothered to look. His partnership with Starbucks in the mid-1990s was the proof of concept that changed everything. Magic Johnson Enterprises opened over 100 Starbucks locations in urban markets across the United States, markets that the company had previously ignored, and generated extraordinary returns while also creating thousands, of jobs in the communities where they operated. The partnership validated his thesis at scale and established his reputation as a business operator who could execute, not just conceptualize. What followed was a cascade of major business ventures built on the same foundational insight. A partnership with Sony Loews produced movie theaters in urban communities across the country, providing cinema access to neighborhoods that had been systematically underserved by the entertainment industry. A Burger King franchise operation. A Washington Commanders NFL ownership stake. His involvement in a group that purchased the Los Angeles Dodgers in 2012 for approximately $2 billion. The largest purchase price in MLB history at that time, represented the full flowering of a business career that had transformed $100 million in basketball earnings into a portfolio generating returns at a scale that made the basketball money look like seed funding. His most recent major venture, EquiTrust Life Insurance Company, acquired through Magic Johnson Enterprises, brought his investment into the financial services sector, extending his portfolio into insurance products and wealth management for communities that have historically been underserved by the financial industry. It is a move that reflects both his business sophistication and his consistent orientation toward markets that others overlook: home, real estate, and lifestyle. Magic Johnson's primary residence is a substantial estate in the Bel Air neighborhood of Los Angeles, one of the most prestigious and private residential enclaves in the world, where the homes sit behind gates and mature trees, and the silence is maintained by the kind of density that only extreme wealth can purchase in a city of 4 million people. The property is proportionate to the man who lives in it, large, warm, and designed for a life that balances genuine privacy with the constant activity of a business operation that never fully stops. The home reflects Cookie Johnson's aesthetic sensibility as much as her husband's. She has been the primary force behind the family's residential environment across their decades of marriage, and her influence is visible in a home that prioritizes comfort and family over the more austere kind of architectural statement that some estates in their price range choose to make. The interiors are inviting. The spaces are designed to hold people, children, grandchildren, business colleagues, old friends from Lansing and East Lansing, and the Showtime era who are still part of the Johnson circle, because Magic Johnson is, at his core, a man who keeps his people. The outdoor spaces, pool, gardens, entertaining areas reflect the Los Angeles lifestyle that has been central to his adult identity since 1979. When a 19-year-old from Lansing arrived in a city that seemed almost fantastically different from everything he had known and proceeded to make it entirely his own, Los Angeles claimed Magic Johnson. But the truth is more accurate in the other direction. Magic Johnson claimed Los Angeles, its culture, its business community, its underserved neighborhoods, and ultimately its Major League Baseball team. He and Cookie also maintained the ability to travel extensively for business and leisure, a life lived across multiple cities and time zones, because a portfolio of his complexity requires presence in boardrooms and at investment meetings across the country. But the Bel Air estate is home in the deepest sense. It is where the family gathers, it is where the day begins, and it is where, after 30-plus years of building an empire, Earvin Johnson Jr. allows himself to simply be a husband, a father, and a grandfather who made good on every promise he ever made. Philanthropy and community impact. Magic Johnson's philanthropy is inseparable from his business philosophy, and that inseparability is precisely what makes it so powerful and so genuine. For most philanthropists, business and giving are separate activities conducted in different rooms with different motivations. For Magic Johnson, they have always been the same room because his fundamental business thesis that underserved communities represent unrecognized value is itself an act of recognition and respect that constitutes a form of giving before a single charitable dollar is deployed. The Magic Johnson Foundation, established in 1991 in direct response to his HIV diagnosis, has operated for over 3 decades as a vehicle for community development, HIV and AIDS awareness and education, college scholarships, and youth empowerment programs. The Foundation's Taylor Michaels Scholarship Program has supported thousands of students from low-income communities in pursuing higher education, a direct investment in the human capital of the communities. Magic Johnson has always considered his primary constituency. His HIV advocacy work deserves its own careful acknowledgement. In the early 1990s, when HIV stigma was at its most virulent and misinformation was at its most dangerous, Magic Johnson's willingness to be publicly, visibly, joyfully alive with the virus was a form of public health intervention that no government program or awareness campaign could have replicated. He demonstrated, with his physical presence and his insistence on full participation in public life, that an HIV diagnosis was not a death sentence, a message that reached communities, particularly Black communities, that had been most devastated by the epidemic and most poorly served by the public health response to it. The number of lives that message saved is not countable, but it is real. His community investment strategy, bringing businesses, jobs, and quality retail options to urban neighborhoods, has created tens of thousands of jobs in communities where employment opportunities are structurally limited. That job creation is philanthropy in the most practical and durable sense. It generates income, builds families, and strengthens communities in ways that charitable giving alone cannot sustain. Personal life, family, and relationships. Cookie Johnson, born Erletha Kelly in Detroit, Michigan, has been the constant in Earvin Johnson's life since they met as students at Michigan State University in the late 1970s. Their relationship spans nearly 5 decades, through the heights of his basketball career and the seismic personal challenge of his HIV announcement in 1991. And it represents something rarer in the entertainment and sports world than any championship trophy. A genuine, sustained, deeply private partnership built on mutual respect, shared faith, and the kind of love that weathers public life without being defined by it. Cookie Johnson's response to her husband's HIV diagnosis in 1991 was one of the most quietly remarkable acts of loyalty in the public record of celebrity marriages. She was pregnant with their son, EJ, at the time of the announcement. She chose, publicly and privately, to stand beside her husband not as a performance of marital solidarity, but as a genuine expression of a commitment she had made and intended to keep. That choice shaped the public understanding of their marriage, and it shaped the private reality of a family that has grown up in the unusual circumstances of extraordinary wealth, extraordinary public visibility, and a father who has never stopped working to be worthy of the people who depend on him. Their son, E.J. Johnson, has lived his life openly and publicly as a gay man, building his own presence in fashion and media and culture, with the full and vocal support of both parents. Magic Johnson's public embrace of his son's identity, at a time when that kind of parental affirmation was not universally offered by prominent athletes and public figures, was a significant cultural moment, one that spoke to the values he and Cookie had built their family around, and one that demonstrated a capacity for growth and love that transcended the cultural conventions of his generation. Their daughter, Elisa, was adopted, and the fullness with which she has been integrated into the Johnson family reflects the understanding of family that Cookie and Earvin have always modeled, that family is not only the product of biology but of intention, commitment, and the daily practice of showing up for one another. The Johnson family, complex and public and imperfect in all the ways that real families are, is ultimately the context within which everything else in Magic Johnson's story makes sense. Legacy and influence. Magic Johnson's legacy operates on 3 distinct frequencies, each genuinely significant, each impossible to fully separate from the others. As a basketball player, he is among the greatest to have ever played the game, a point guard of unprecedented vision whose influence is felt in every generation that followed. As an HIV advocate, he is a figure of genuine historical importance, a man whose personal courage at a moment of cultural crisis helped redirect a national conversation and save lives, whose number cannot be calculated, but whose reality is beyond dispute. But it is as a business architect that his legacy may prove most enduring. The blueprint he constructed over 3 decades of post-basketball entrepreneurship is not simply a financial achievement. It is an argument that Black wealth is not an anomaly, that urban investment is not charity, and that genuine respect for underserved markets can generate returns that confound everything the conventional investment community believes about where value lives and who deserves access to capital. Every athlete who has successfully transitioned from playing career to business empire has, whether they acknowledge it or not, been influenced by the path he cleared. His willingness to teach and to make his philosophy replicable transformed him from a success story into something rarer, a living blueprint. He is 65 years old, still building, still investing, still showing up. The $1 billion is real. The championships are permanent. But the most important thing Magic Johnson ever built was the argument that betting on people everyone else underestimated is the most sophisticated investment strategy of all. The game never ended. It just moved to a bigger court.